This is going to be an unboxing, assembly, and first impressions on the Framework Laptop DIY edition. But before I do that, I'm just going to spend a minute here and talk about what Framework is and who this product is for. And I will try to add a timestamp below if that doesn't interest you, and you can just skip right to the unboxing part. So Framework is a new company that was started in January of 2020. This is their first and only product at the moment, but it's possible that they may make other devices in the future if this one's successful. So they've aligned themselves very strongly with the right to repair movement. And for those not familiar with it, the right to repair movement seeks to fight back against product manufacturers who have sought to redefine property rights by restricting the ability of consumers to repair their own devices. This is a problem that is not by any means exclusive to consumer electronics, but it is particularly problematic in this industry. Over the years, manufacturers have been increasingly engaged in a variety of practices that are hostile to consumers in order to reduce choice, reduce competition, and thereby maximize their profits. There are quite a few forms that can take, but in the consumer electronics industry, it's typically engineering their devices to make it more difficult or sometimes impossible to replace components. They restrict access to service manuals and schematics. They void the warranty if a device is opened or upgraded or used in a manner or for a purpose that the manufacturer does not approve of. And they, generally speaking, will refuse to make replacement parts available. And some manufacturers go even further than that by paying off their suppliers so that their suppliers can't sell parts that they make to anyone else. And in doing so, they shut out independent repair shops and consumers from buying those parts from third parties in the case where the manufacturer won't sell them. So the result is that we're stuck with products that don't last as long because when components fail, you have no choice but to replace the entire device. And each year we are needlessly throwing away a massive number of devices that could otherwise be repaired, which of course generates a lot of unnecessary e-waste. And right to repair is really just about consumer choice. It's about your right to do what you want with your own property. Framework is a company that has promised to respect your right to repair and not only permit but encourage you to open your device, modify your device, upgrade it, repair it, etc. They've committed to opening a marketplace where their customers can purchase replacement parts, upgrades, accessories for a reasonable price. And Framework, largely speaking, so far has received quite a bit of praise, and they've received endorsements from figures like Louis Rossmann, who is quite a prominent figure in the right to repair movement. So they've certainly made a lot of promises, and expectations are quite high for this company. So who is this product for? I would say it's primarily aimed at technology enthusiasts who like to tinker with and upgrade their devices. As I mentioned, this is the DIY edition, which is more or less a bare bones laptop that you can order with or without components like RAM, storage, and Wi-Fi. So there will be some assembly required with this, but they will also sell the same laptop pre-assembled and configured with Windows pre-installed on it. I think that there are other buyers who might be interested in this product even if they are not technically savvy, or even if they have no intention of opening it up themselves. For example, people that care about their environmental impact and want to reduce waste, people that are willing to pay a small premium upfront for a product that promises to last longer and will be less expensive to own in the long run. They may want the option of being able to bring their device to a local repair shop instead of having to replace the entire device when something goes wrong. Or even people that just align with Framework's philosophy and they want to support a new company that's providing an alternative to the established players in the space, which could push other manufacturers in a direction that will have a net benefit to consumers. So at this point, it needs to be mentioned that there have been companies before Framework that have tried to build products like this and have failed. And as I mentioned, what Framework is trying to do here is extremely ambitious. They've made some big promises. They're up against some huge players that dominate this space. They have enormous economies of scale that allow them to sell for significantly smaller margins than Framework can as a startup company. And there's no guarantee that this company is going to be around 3 years from now to sell you replacement parts for this device, despite their promises. So there's certainly some risk involved with purchasing an expensive device from a brand new company. The other thing I just wanted to mention briefly is why I bought this laptop. I was looking for a Linux development machine for work. I currently use a 15-inch MacBook Pro, which I purchased in 2018. And I've bounced back and forth between Linux and Mac OS over the years, but I prefer the freedom of open source operating systems like Linux, but I've kind of been stuck on Mac OS due to the need to use several proprietary applications that don't support Linux. But thanks to an increase in web applications and better cross OS support for desktop applications built on frameworks like Electron, I felt like I could finally make the jump back to Linux as my primary operating system. And I will admit that I wasn't planning to buy a new laptop just yet, but the philosophy and vision behind Framework was very compelling to me. And I'm the type of person that believes very strongly in voting with your dollars, and I really wanted to see this company succeed. So if I help this company grow and they can offer new products and push the industry in a direction that's good for consumers, they can hopefully continue to be a force for good. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and open this up and we'll talk about the spec that I ordered here. This is batch 4 out of 5, so they're shipping in 5 different batches for launch, which is a more cost-effective way for them to bootstrap manufacturing. And I ordered this on September 1st with an expected ship date in October. And it is now October 9th. It shipped on October 7th. So they've kept things on schedule, which is really important and also impressive for a new startup, especially considering the supply chain disruptions and global chip shortages that have been caused by the pandemic. So like I mentioned, this is the DIY edition. I assume that in here these are some of the components that we're going to have to install. Also got a packing list invoice here. And we've got the box for the laptop itself and a power brick. So this is the Intel i7-1165G7, which is the Tiger Lake architecture. We also should have in here 2 32GB DDR4 3200 modules, so 64 gigabytes in total. A 500GB Western Digital Black SN850 NVMe solid state storage, and an Intel AX210 Wi-Fi 6 networking module. No operating system included, so I plan to use Arch Linux with this. And it is kind of nice to be able to buy a laptop without the Windows license, not to have that cost built into the device. 13.5-inch non-touch display with a 3:2 aspect ratio. And somewhere in here we should also have, I suppose maybe it could be in the power adapter box, some expansion cards, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Nope, this is just the power brick. So pretty small power brick with USB Type-C, so no barrel connectors, charging ports in this laptop. So let's go ahead and open this up. So inside the lid of the box here, we've got some kind of like graphic or schematic, which is pretty cool. And the other thing that I'll just mention here is that all this packaging is looks to be recycled. You don't quite have the same unboxing, so-called unboxing experience that you do with Apple products or other high-end electronics. So it's kind of nice to see more reusable packaging. Let's go ahead and take this out. So the lid of the laptop has their Gear Cog logo, which is pretty cool looking, very minimalist. And it's constructed of, I believe, aluminum, so it feels very high quality. It feels pretty small to me. I'm used to a 15-inch MacBook, so that's going to be something that I will need to get used to, but let's go ahead and open up the lid here. So it has a very glossy 13.5-inch screen here. Keyboard, the keys have quite a bit of travel, which is nice. Certainly a lot more than my my MacBook does. Nothing very surprising here. The keyboard layout is what you would expect. The trackpad is nice and clicky. I believe it's a glass trackpad. And we do have built into the power button here a fingerprint reader, which does have driver support for Linux, I do believe. At the top here we've got a 1080p webcam and a kill switch. Kill switch is for both the microphone as well as the webcam. Those are hardware kill switches, so that's really nice to see as well. On the bottom here we have these slots. So these are for, I had mentioned before, expansion cards, and that is one of the unique features that is being marketed with this laptop. Somewhere in here, I'm gonna have to find them. Maybe it's in this packet here. We should have expansion cards that allow you to select which I/O you'd like for your laptop. So you can get USB Type-C, which you'll have to have at least one of those in here because it is a USB Type-C charging brick. But other than that, you can get things like USB Type-A, you can get HDMI, external storage cards, which are more or less USB drives, but I suspect that in the future they're going to expand that to offer other types of things like maybe gigabit Ethernet or LTE modems, things like that. So it should be pretty interesting. Let's see what's inside of this here. So we do have our Western Digital Black here, 500 gigabytes. Bunch of expansion cards just kind of thrown in here, so we should have 4 of these USB Type-C, which we do. I did order a 250 gigabyte expansion card. We have 2 sticks of Crucial 32 gigabyte DDR4. What else is in here? We do have an HDMI. So you can put up to 4 of these in at a time, but you can carry some of them around if you want to swap them out, which is pretty handy. And 1 USB Type-A, I believe. Gonna need some Wi-Fi here. Hopefully there's a Wi-Fi in here. Yep. We've got our Intel Wi-Fi card as well. So they did send me everything that I ordered, so that's a good start. So I'm gonna organize this stuff and we'll go ahead and open it up and start assembling. So I've got everything organized here. I realized I didn't talk about this. So they do include in the box a Torx screwdriver as well as a spudger on the other end, so that's kind of handy. I think it's sort of almost a little bit of a marketing gimmick, but they're basically telling you that they want you to be able to open this and to upgrade it, etc. I believe they also include it even if you don't order the DIY edition, so that's kind of a nice thing to include. There's also some literature here which looks pretty useless, so I'm just going to toss that over here. And I'm going to go ahead and just open this up, so we move this as well. We've got, let's see, it looks like 5 screws here. And these are captive screws, which means that they don't actually come out. They're going to be held in place, which is really great because you can't lose them. I think I might have missed this one. Let's try this. So they should be all the way out. And now we're going to flip it over. And I'm just going to gently pull on the back here. So this is entirely held in here with magnets. And I'm just going to, okay. So the ribbon cable on the back of the top case here is actually really long, which is great. And it seems to be pretty durable as well. So that is the inside of the Framework laptop. I'm just going to go ahead and pull this ribbon cable off so we don't damage anything. And one of the things that you'll notice here is that they've labeled everything with QR codes, and those, I believe, are to send you to different guides for how to upgrade and replace the parts, and eventually I believe it's also going to include links to purchase replacement parts, upgrades, etc. So I'm just going to go ahead and try scanning the storage one here. Just give that a try. So we get the storage replacement guide. So this is a lot like iFixit. If you've ever used iFixit, it's really easy instructions to follow. They tell you the difficulty level, number of steps, amount of time required, what tools you'll need. So they tell you to disconnect the power, shut down the Framework laptop. Let's go ahead and do this because we're going to install this right now. So we've already done these steps of unscrewing the fasteners. We've lifted the input cover. They're saying to remove the storage, but there's no storage installed yet. So let's go ahead and open up this box. So that's our solid state, and we do already have a screw actually in place there, so I'm going to have to remove that. The other thing that's really nice about this is it's one single Torx bit for every single screw in here. So to take apart my MacBook, I believe you need 5 different screwdrivers, which is pretty ridiculous. I'm going to remove that screw. And it's a magnetic screwdriver, that's handy. So storage is installed there, that was pretty simple. I'm going to go ahead and pop these RAM modules in. I don't think I need an installation guide for that. Here's the first one. A little bit of force to put those in. Here's the second one. Those are secured there. Let's get rid of some of this trash. So, like I mentioned, this is more of a bare bones kit than anything. The CPU is soldered to the main board here. It's not really like building a laptop yourself. It's more like being able to customize the parts in it, and then you do the final assembly here. But it is kind of a cool thing. So we've got the Wi-Fi module here, and we're gonna have to remove a couple of screws here. So let's go ahead and do that. We're gonna have to do some routing here if I pull that out. So I think this is actually going to be easiest if I attach the antenna cables first. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. It's a little bit tricky to do, especially when you've got cameras to reach around. Okay, so both of those are on there. I'm going to go ahead and put this into the slot, and we're going to have to do a little bit of routing here to make sure that these don't get pinched. This is probably the hardest part of the assembly here, but it's not too bad. So I think these cables are just about where they need to be. So I'm going to go ahead and carefully put this little bracket in place. So the bracket holds, it's got a screw that actually holds the card in and holds these antenna wires in place. So you just want to make sure that this part is not upside down and that this is properly holding those two cables on. And that's basically it. We've got the solid state in, we've got the memory in, and we've got our Wi-Fi module in. So I'm going to go ahead and put the top case back on here. And that's got a nice snap so that you know that it's in place. I love how that's just held on with magnets. And we'll go ahead and put those screws back in. So the only thing we've really got left to do here is just to put some of these expansion cards in. Go ahead and rip these open. I have that right, yep. And that's got a nice click. Feels like it's in there pretty solidly, so I'm not too worried about that coming out. I'm just going to do all USB Type-C for now. Pretty quick to install. And I suppose this is like a release mechanism here, this button. Oh. We're gonna have to read the manual. Let's go ahead and flip this over here. And we can go ahead and just try booting it up here, I suppose. See if there's any life in that battery. So it doesn't look like we've got any power here. I'm just gonna go ahead and try connecting up the power brick, and we'll see if I have to go back in there. If I knock the connector loose or something like that. Then I'm gonna go ahead and plug it in first. The other end of the power brick here has got like a 90-degree connector, which is pretty nice. So that's in, and we do have an LED light there on the power button. So the LED on the power button is on, but we do not seem to have anything on the display. So I'm going to do a little bit of troubleshooting here, and I will get back to you when I figure out what's going on. So I had thought that I knocked something loose or that something was wrong because I wasn't getting anything on the display here, but it turns out, I don't know, the first boot here it just took about, seemed like maybe 15 to 30 seconds. And of course there's no operating system or anything installed, so I'm just getting a boot device missing message. But it looks like everything seems to be in order here. So next up I'm gonna have to get an operating system on here. I'm gonna do Arch Linux, I believe. But overall, I am very happy with this. I'm very happy with the build quality, the form factor of it. I'm really impressed with just how well thought out the inside of this laptop is. And I guess the last thing that I should talk about here that I failed to do earlier was the price of this computer. So I paid $1,844 for this computer with taxes. It was free shipping, so that is not a small amount of money. But considering the specs on this computer, I think it is a fair price. You can get the i5 version of this with 16 gigabytes of RAM and 500 gigabyte solid state with no operating system pre-installed for about $1,000, which is right around the same ballpark when you compare it with more mainstream competitors like the Dell XPS 13. This obviously has 64 gigabytes of RAM. I mean, I don't know even how many other laptops there are in this form factor that do support up to 64 gigabytes of RAM. And there's a lot of really compelling features even beyond the repairability factor. I mean, you've got the modular ports, which is a pretty handy feature. You have high performance choices for components like RAM and storage. When you buy a laptop from Dell or HP, sometimes they just give you, kind of the cheapest possible option so that they can make the biggest possible margin on the device because people don't really pay too much attention to that. And we've got a pretty unique aspect ratio for this device, for this display. So it's a 3:2 aspect ratio. I am a developer. I think that could be pretty handy for, using text editors. And it's just as slim and lightweight as other modern Ultrabooks here. So I don't have my other laptop handy, but this is that's really the key here, is that you don't really have to sacrifice in order to get the level of repairability and modularity of this device. This is a compelling device in its own right. It's thin, it's light, it's powerful. The keyboard's great, the trackpad seems great so far anyway, so we're gonna have to test it and see if it lives up to that hype. But overall, I'm very happy with this so far. So if there's anything that you would like to see tested on this, any particular features that you are interested in, please let me know and I would be happy to do a review.